Welcome to Not This, Not That, where we push our boundaries of understanding and perception. I am your host, Rev Patricia Cagganello, and I invite you to join me as we open to the possibility that things may not be exactly as you believe, as you've been told, that there could be more, that in our collective consciousness is the potential for the all. You can find Not This, Not That on the Sacred Stories podcast on sacredstoriesmedia.com and on iTunes and all streaming services. Click to subscribe and join us each show. Today, we are expanding our boundaries of understanding on the topic of shamanism, and more specifically, the topic of breathwork in shamanism from a shaman's perspective. We have the pleasure of speaking with one of our master teachers of our upcoming Shamanism Masterclass of Sacred You, visionary teacher and shamanic guide, Linda Star Wolf. So welcome, Star Wolf, to Not This, Not That.
Thank you, Patricia. It's an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm super excited because the masterclass is a phenomenal course. And let me just start by saying that Linda Star Wolf, Dr. Stephen Farmer, and Ana Maria Vasquez, three master teachers and shamans, are holding a masterclass at Sacred You, starting February 5th and running through March 2nd. And we'll post the link and we'll talk a little bit about the course during this podcast. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because three master teachers and shamans are bringing their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience on the ancient practice of shamanism to all of us. So, Star Wolf, let's start with that. What or how would you describe shamanism?
Well, Patricia, as you know, shamanism is a very big topic right now, and it's something that many people would describe in many different ways. But for me, shamanism in its ancient form or its indigenous form is something that's been around for a very long time, thousands of years. And I believe that shamanism really is the root of all the major religions today, that it was the first, if you will, spiritual ceremonial path of the most ancient of cultures, and that it's been around from millennia. And that it's a path to wholeness. It's a path of interconnectedness between all things, people, animals, creatures, of all things. And it's very deeply connected with walking a spiral path that relates to all the elements of earth, water, fire, and air. So there's a saying in many of the Native American traditions, but there's one that's specifically relevant to this, and I think it goes like this. It's Om Mitakuye, Om Mitakuye. And what that really means is we're all related. So for me, in a nutshell, shamanism is about that connectedness and that we were all related.
So when you talk about all related, I just want to stay on that topic just for a moment before we move into breath work. But you brought in the elements, right? And when we're all related, when we were speaking with Ana Maria Vasquez, another one of the shamans in the master class, she brings in, as far as related to, and I believe you alluded to it, the stone beings, the tree people, the beings in the natural world. Can you speak on that just a little bit, go a little deeper for us on what and who are we all related with?
Well, the truth is, for me at least, is that we are all brothers and sisters. And that includes everything. And, some people call it the stone people. And others talk about the standing people, the trees and the green nations. And then all the creatures, and sometimes the way it's described from my teacher from many years ago, Grandmother Twyla of the Seneca Wolf Clan Nation, she called them creature teachers. And that's everything from the swimming ones, the flying creatures, the crawling ones, the ones that howl, growl, screech, the ones that are silent. That includes the insect world. I wrote a book several years ago called Sacred Medicine, and it was about the bee and the spider and the worm and the butterfly. And all creatures, large and small, from the largest that you can think of, the elements of whales, to the tiniest little ant and microorganism. that we're a part of all of it. We're not apart from it. In remembering our connection to everything, we remember that everything is within us and that we are within everything too. And so there's this interconnectedness that's really the most important thing to know, is that when we forget that interconnectedness, that we lose our sense of ourself and our brothers and sisters. And this is how we can see the environment that's being destroyed right now, and the creatures, because no one understands or seriously takes this understanding to a deeper level, that when we hurt the environment, when we hurt these ecosystems, that we're hurting ourselves. So at the heart of shamanism really is understanding, the ecological awareness of our whole planet and our interrelatedness.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that shamanism is one of the most ancient of ceremonial practices or cultures or traditions that many of the even religious traditions have been based on. And so would you say that shamanism, in the form of, it's not only an understanding of the interconnectedness, but it's also a practice, correct?
Well, for me, it's a daily practice, and sometimes it's a moment-by-moment practice. And I was just teaching a workshop this past weekend, and I said to the women's group that I had, walking a shamanic path and living a shamanic consciousness and being embodied in shamanic consciousness is not something I do just on weekends or at a workshop. It's a spiritual practice. It's a daily practice of each day remembering that I'm connected to the whole. Each day remembering that I'm connected to the sky and the earth. And I have a very simple prayer that I do every day that I was taught by my Wolf Clan grandmother. And that is to stand out each day. And she said, if you can be in your birthday suit, and I'm in a place where I can, up where I live in the mountains, even if it's really cold, just walk outside on your porch or your deck or whatever. And you can do this fully clothed too. But she said to really be vulnerable and to just walk out and hold your hands to the sky. I do this as I look to the mountains every day and say, help, and then thank you. And then bend over and touch your toes. And I always love this because Graham was in her 80s when she taught me this, and she could just reach right over and touch her toes. And she said, touch your toes and touch the earth and say, help, and thank you. And then come back and place your hands onto your own beautiful heart and everything that you've encountered in your life and everything that you're working towards and that you're striving towards, and opening your heart and say help and thank you. And that this simple practice is a simple shamanic prayer of help and thank you. Plus, she said it's just good manners to say help and to then say thank you to what helped you. That by going ahead and saying help, you're having humility, and you're asking your brothers and sisters, the mountains, the sky, the tree, the animals, nature. You're asking everything, whatever you see as a god or goddess or deity or higher being, whatever, you're asking for help and you're thanking it. And you're also really reaching deep into the earth and thanking the earth for everything that the earth gives us, which is everything physical in the physical world that we have, and to all of our brothers and sisters. And then back to our own heart for how hard I believe in that most human beings really try to walk their path and be as on their path as they can, even when we're not doing it very well, that we're at least trying. And sometimes we don't have the answers or know how. And then that constant thank you is an acknowledgement of what we have already, the fact that we're alive and we've been giving these things every day, and that our heart is still beating, and that we're still trying to do our best. So this is a very simple but beautiful shamanic spiritual practice that acknowledges our oneness with all things, that acknowledges our humility and our gratitude.
Help and thank you. I absolutely love that. I think I will be adopting that shamanic practice myself. And there's other practices. Let's talk about breath work, because I know a few years ago when I was going through seminary, it's really interesting. One of the things we learned was that the breath is really the connection to the divine God source, and even the name of God means breath in some of the more ancient languages. And breath work is very important in shamanism, correct?
Absolutely. One of the reasons that breath work is very often a part of shamanism is because breathing in a certain manner can help us alter our consciousness. I think most people are familiar with this around perhaps yoga. Doing the breathing while they're doing certain postures expands their consciousness, their flexibility, helps them hold certain poses or mudras or sutras. Also around meditation. Meditation and mindfulness is very much a growing practice all around the country and the world, although it's been a very popular practice, of course, in the eastern part of the world for millennia. It's really caught on the past, especially here, the past 50 to 75 years. And now you hear everyone talking about mindfulness meditation. And in meditation, you usually are using a certain type of breath to kind of help clear your mind and to kind of focus on emptiness, or perhaps even to focus on an affirmation or mantra. So the breath is already, I think most of us know, is an important part of our health, important part of changing consciousness. And one more example of that before I speak about shamanic breath work, and that is even exercising. We notice that the breath changes and it moves in a different way, and then it activates certain chemicals, and that's why we call it a runner's high. There's certain chemicals that are released in the body from running or exercising in a certain way. And I might add, making love with your beloved, with your partner, releases this similar or and even some different kind of chemicals through the body that create this feeling of health and well-being and expansion. And if people are really connected to their loved one, it also creates a feeling of, many times, of a spiritual experience for people. And so with breath work, people go, well, why do I have to work to breathe? I breathe every day. But, I had somebody say that to me, like, well, why would I, be working at it? Most people, first of all, aren't really taking deep breaths. They're just kind of doing little short breaths. And what we frequently don't realize that we're often holding our breath because we're tense or stressed out or afraid. We're in a fear reaction. We're in anxiety. It could just be because we're in traffic or we're in a hurry to get someplace. Those kinds of things. Keep our appointments. But frequently we're anxious and holding our breath, or there's trauma in our bodies. And I can't imagine that anybody hasn't experienced at least some trauma in their lifetime. That whenever that happened, that we clutched up, and it's kind of like taking, they used to say a Kodak moment. I know people use their phones to take pictures now, but we used to have Kodak cameras, and it was a Kodak moment. That it was a Kodak moment when you had a trauma happen that instantly took a photograph in your cells and started holding that energy. And after a period of time, that trauma replicating itself in the body could create all kinds of symptoms, including a real tension and holding our breath and not fully being present. So breath work itself is a way to activate a natural altered state of consciousness. So you wouldn't want to do this while you're driving, this particular exercise. Probably not climbing up an escalator in the airport, but certainly being at home or sitting in nature or in a workshop or, taking some time for yourself to do breathing, whatever it might be, or with a group of people. This particular practice of breath work can alter your consciousness enough to where you can begin to journey. And you spoke about that. We've talked about that quite a bit, about shamans teach people how to journey. And we can say more about that if you would like. But shamanic breath work itself is a very powerful and yet very safe practice to learn how to breathe in a manner to alter your consciousness enough to where you can go on your own shaman's journey to clear things, to heal things, to release anxiety, to discover more joy, to have a vision, to connect with yourself and the natural world and all things, really.
And you bring us through, and you explain all this, you teach this, and people can experience this in the course. You have a course called Awaken the Shaman Within, which is part of the larger master class, The Shaman's Way, at Sacred You. And people can experience breath work and even a shamanic journey within your course, correct?
Yes, that's true. And, in our full-on day-long workshops, or, for instance, we have like a whole month training where we do a practitioner-teacher training, and we're doing lots of breath work almost every day during that month long. But I learned a long time ago that the breath is so powerful. As you said, it's frequently the breath in many different languages is the name of God, and we know that the very first thing we do is breathe in life, and the last thing we do is exhale. So there's all those little breaths in between and how we're breathing. And so in the shamanic breath work, I've learned that I can teach people, for instance, I frequently go to bookstores with my book, and instead of giving just a book talk, I'll talk about my book a little bit, and then I'll say, how many of you would like to go on a journey? And right there in Barnes and Nobles or East West Bookstore or many of the bookstores across the country, most people raise their hand. And I'll say, okay, right here, right in the middle of everything, we're going to close our eyes. I'm going to beat my drum. I'm going to put a little music on, and I'm going to teach you a method to breathe for about 10 minutes and see what happens. And so I've had people come back from that 10-minute journey and say it was the most profound experience of their life. It's incredible what happens when we breathe and have the intention to breathe and to journey and to let go, and we use this method. So yes, in the course, I go quite a bit into explaining about shamanic consciousness and how to embody it. I talk quite a bit about the process of shamanic breath work as a wonderful tool that can accelerate consciousness, one of the quickest ways I know to move into a natural altered state of consciousness that's safe, that you can do on your own or with a group. And then I also explain about some of the places you might visit on that journey, so that you can it's kind of like in a traveler's tour magazine. And, it's not the same as experiencing it firsthand if you go to Peru with me or Egypt or someplace like that. But by looking at the itinerary or seeing some of the photos, you're kind of prepared. So that's part of what I do, is I explain what you might see, what you might experience. And then I say, basically let your imagination run wild.
So just for clarity, what we've spoken about is breath work or breathing across different traditions and modalities. We had mentioned yoga, exercise, or even just, meditation and so forth. But then there's a specific kind of breath work that is used within shamanic practices to bring you into an altered state of consciousness. But then there's also a process that you created more than 21 years ago that you call shamanic breath work. That is your particular process as a shaman to bring people into an expanded state so that they can go on a journey.
Yes, Patricia, I have been doing breath work of various kinds, really since, I always tell, this dates me a little bit, but since the 60s when I was a teenager and started practicing transcendental meditation because the Beatles did it. And that was my first breathing experiences, and then practicing yoga in my 20s before it was even popular to do yoga. And then guided meditations and visualizations with Shakti Gawain many, many, many years ago, when she wrote her book on creative visualization. I think I was in my 30s then. And then I started discovering all these other kinds of things like rebirthing and holotropic breathwork and integrative breathwork and pranayama breathwork and tantric breathwork. And simultaneously, I was really immersing myself in many different spiritual practices and indigenous practices, learning from master medicine men, medicine women, teachers from the Seneca, the Cherokee, Mayan, in more recent days, it's been from African, Egyptian. I've been all over the world and to many different places and worked with many different shamans, and some very short time and some for a much, much longer time. But all of a sudden, this whole path that I have been on, from being a seeker my whole life, and certainly an adventurer, and also being a psychotherapist since I was 20 years old, and delving deeply into psychology and deeply into Jungian psychology, as well as the more kind of present day, more modern psychology and psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. All of a sudden I could see where everything behind everything I was doing was shamanism. Everything. And what I meant by that, I understood that the ancient shamans had always used movement, sound, music, and the breath in order to create altered states. Probably even before they discovered that certain plants would create an altered state. And I've worked with shamans that worked with plant medicines and shamans that worked primarily with music or movement or breath. But I finally came to the realization that I could still stay somewhat in my own consciousness, which I think is important. Having been one who did plenty of psychedelic research in the 60s, I really came to understand that it's not that I want to be controlling, but I wanted to be able to bridge the world between the altered state and the state of being in this world. And by putting these things together, putting together movement, music, breathing, art, there's an art process involved, and then being able to write about that process, share about that process, was about as altered as I think anybody really needs to get, to be honest with you. I think that the altered state is to get beyond our ego and our everyday rush hour traffic hamburger stand consciousness. But people can also get lost in altered states, and I know that firsthand. So I really like to encourage people to use the altered state of shamanic breathwork, not to leave this planet and just kind of hang out in the ethers or only hang out, in the upper planes, but to bring back the wisdom, the healing, the beauty, the experience, the vision, the healing and transformation to their very human lives. And that's where it's going to count. Grandmother Twyla always said to me, Star Wolf, it's what you're doing growing corn. Will it feed you and feed the people? If not, then stop it.
Grandmother Twyla sounds like a very wise woman for sure.
Yes, yes.
So the course, let's just talk briefly about the course at Sacred You. You have your Awaken the Shaman Within, which is again part of the larger masterclass, The Shaman's Way. What can people expect, or what would you hope they would receive upon going through participating in Awaken the Shaman Within?
My greatest hope is that shamanism will stop being such a mystery, and yet that it will always create magic and mystery for people every time they participate in a shamanic practice. And what I mean by that is that I believe that shamanism is our birthright. I think that the more that each one of us can connect to our human nature, we will realize that we are part water, earth, fire, and air, and spirit, and that this is who we are, and that we're connected to everything, and that we get, I love technology and I love all the modern day things that we have, but we can let that take us over to the point that we forget the animal part of ourselves that needs sunshine, that needs to walk, that needs to drink plenty of water, that needs to eat nourishing food, that needs to have meaningful face-to-face relationships and hugs that are physical and real, not just hugging on, Facebook, which I hug a lot of people on Facebook, but you can send it energetically. But to have this natural contact with ourselves, our environment, with other people, with creatures, and all those kinds of things. Shamanism really as a daily practice is a way of relating to your own nature and to the super nature, the supernatural, the magical things that happen when we're present in our bodies and have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and all the synchronicities that come to us. So in this course, I'm really hoping that people will see that awakening their shaman within is really simply about becoming who it is they already are. It's about removing the blocks and remembering who we are, really more than it is about learning anything specific. And yet, of course, there are specific things that we learn to help us remember. So we can remember to breathe. We can remember how connected we are to the elements. We can learn how to work with our own personal medicine wheel and how to walk a medicine wheel. Even if we don't have one of our own in our backyard, we can make a small one, a miniature one with some stones on our kitchen table or create an altar. We can learn how to create a simple altar or an elaborate altar and why we would want to have an altar in our house. For instance, having just a place in the house where you light a candle and maybe have some flowers or maybe a feather that you picked up when you were taking a walk. There's so many different tools, shamanic tools that I talk about in my course and that we talk about in the master course with all three of us that can help people come back to this more natural way of being human, fully human, not only spiritual, but fully human. And to remember that the shaman's path is to walk a mystical path with practical feet and to bring that love and healing back to our beautiful planet. We're only here for a short period of time, even if there's reincarnation, even if people believe that, and think that we're here many times, which I happen to think that's true. At the same time, we only get this one life that we're in the way that it's in. And I happen to believe that we're not here by accident, that everything is here on purpose. So if we're here on purpose, that means each one of us has a sacred purpose. So by doing these shamanic practices, we can awaken that shaman within, remember who we are, and get on track and find more joy and happiness in our lives. Because when we feel that we're on purpose, all of us have more happiness in our lives. Even if we're struggling, we know, hey, I'm on purpose, and this makes me happy.
And I'm going to be posting the links to the Awaken the Shaman Within individual course with Linda Star Wolf and the Shaman's Way, the master class with Star Wolf, Dr. Stephen Farmer, and Ana Maria Vasquez. So I will post those links in the show comments. But Star Wolf, tell everyone your website and how they can get in touch with you outside of the course also, please.
Sure. My website is, of course, www.shamanicbreathwork.org. My organization is a nonprofit, and it's called Venus Rising Association for Transformation. If you go to shamanicbreathwork.org, it will pop up the Venus Rising page. There's lots of information there. There's lots of information about the 9 books that I've written or co-authored and upcoming books that are coming out, and all kinds of events from the shamanic mystery tours that we take people to Peru and Egypt and Bali and all kinds of places around the world. We're going to Peru in October. And also all of our events, including all of our training and degree programs. If I could just mention that we do have our own university, and all the credits, all the classes that people take with me through Sacred U will also transfer to Venus Rising University. And we'll also consider all the other master teachers courses as equivalents for our degree programs too. So we have a breathwork training program, a minister training program, and degree program. So there's lots there. Go to the events page on that page, and you can see what we're doing and what we're up to. And we're pretty busy these days awakening shamanic consciousness.
And that's shamanicbreathwork.org. Absolutely, there is. Yes. It's just a wealth of information and opportunities with Star Wolf and her Venus Rising Association. So, Linda Star Wolf, I just want to say thank you so very much for being here today with us on Not This, Not That.
Well, thank you so much, Patricia. I love Sacred U. I love talking with you. And I think this course is going to be a lot of fun. And I think that people are going to just really understand how practical it is, how this is practical shamanism, and that it's not something they have to be intimidated by. It's something they can enjoy, take at their own pace, because it's really about simply unveiling and remembering who they really are at the heart of themselves.
I like that. And that is absolutely true. And I do encourage everyone to check out the Awaken the Shaman Within course, the Shaman's Way Masterclass, and all of the wonderful work that Star Wolf and her team are doing at shamanicbreathwork.org. So thank you, Star Wolf. And I want to say thank you to our audience for listening. I am your host, Rev Patricia Cagganello, and you have been listening to Not This, Not That.